Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this podcasting sort of thing that we've been doing these past couple of months. So today we have a special stream. We're going to be talking about the Super Mario RPG Remake, which just released as of yesterday, as it is currently the morning or afternoon, depending on what time zone you are, of November 18th. And with us today, I'm joined by my good friend, Tiny Tim 78.
Hello there, folks. Welcome to another RPG Limit Break podcast. We are looking forward to this. I am so looking forward to this. One of my favourite RPG games, and I think Ghost is obviously a massive fan of this one as well. Mm-hmm. And we have the Queen herself. We have the fantastic Pidge01. Welcome, Pidge.
Hi. Thanks for having me on the show. Always happy to talk about SMRPG in any capacity.
Yeah, it was actually kind of interesting because when we were originally pitching some of the early ideas of the show that we were planning to do, we had our initial, pilot, and then we talked with Palmer about upcoming games, and then somewhere in there, Ghoul was like, I really want to get Pidge on for Super Mario RPG now that we confirmed the remake. And since then, we have another Mario RPG remake coming out, which is pretty exciting for me as a fan of all of these games growing up.
I want to interject at that point, actually, Ghost, and just say that, and I know this is slightly off topic, but I'll just do it quickly. Thousand Year Door is the remake that you've mentioned.
Yes.
Do you think that at any stage they'll go back and we'll get Paper Mario?
I hope so. I don't think it's on the radar.
I would love to see Paper Mario. That's the one I wanted to see personally.
Yeah, my suspicion is that because it's on the Switch eShop or the Switch, Switch Live NSO online thing, that it's not a priority, whereas T2ID has kind of been GameCube locked for forever.
Of course.
And speaking of game locked, that was kind of the thing that I noticed with Super Mario RPG. For the longest time, this was like a game that, people really, really liked, that just had a hard time becoming more accessible. And it's been just fascinating seeing, back in the mid-2000s, there was a huge push to get this game, on modern platforms, on, at the time, like the Wii Virtual Console, on like a DS remake and stuff. Like, people have been talking about a remake for this game for literally decades. I would know. I saw the mid-2000s internet. But yeah, now 27 years later, we finally have it. So, Pidge, you being the one who is the most familiar with the speedrun scene, and by most familiar, I don't mean just in this call. I mean probably like out of it, like every person on Earth, there would be like one or two people more, maybe. So what's it like seeing the remake for you?
It definitely came as a surprise for a lot of reasons. Just because, like you were saying, this was one of the most demanded games to be on a modern console, and there's actually numbers to back that up. In the early 2000s, Nintendo Power got a ton of they put out a poll asking, what do you want to see on the Game Boy Advance? And they said by far the most suggestions they got were for a port of SMRPG, which we never got. In the mid-late 2000s, they put out polls to their readers on what games do you want to see on Virtual Console. Top 3 every month was Super Mario RPG until it actually got released. Wii U Virtual Console comes around and SMRPG drops. And from the day it dropped, right up until the stats for this stopped being collected, almost every single week it was a top 20 seller in the eShop. And that eShop also includes actual Wii U exclusive titles, like not just Virtual Console. Like, it was just a top 20 title on the Wii U for basically its entire run. So like the demand has always been there. And it's pretty cool to see that the powers that be finally gave in. And it's like, kind of even more surprising, given that, like, as you know, like in the last couple of releases, Paper Mario has kind of broken away from the RPG format, because like Miyamoto is on record as a known RPG hater and is not really trying to explore that with Mario anymore. So SMRPG fans are like, well, screw us, I guess. And what I think the turning point is that they decided to explore making a movie, which is like one of the, if not the best-selling movie of all time. And
yeah, it was like number one of video games. I think number one of the year. I was surprised to see that.
And that kind of like tipped off the video game industry. Like, yes, we still want stories about Mario, like actual stories. So SMRPG Remake coming out in the same year kind of feels like it's capitalizing off of that, like kind of hoping that would be a smash hit. And then because like Alpha Dream going under, we're not really getting any games like that anymore. So here's SMRPG Remake to tide you over while we figure out what we're going to do with the fact that we know now that people still want Mario in stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you were saying with the 2000s, I remember distinctly, it was a website. I can't remember the name. I want to say it was something like We Want Super Mario RPG, but it was like 2004 to like 2007. It was this big fan community to push for Super Mario RPG to get any sort of re-release, because it wasn't even out on the Wii Virtual Console. Like as soon as they announced Wii Virtual Console, they were like, we want to petition Square. They got like, 5-digit signatures, like, digital signatures or whatever, but they got a huge amount of people, and Square actually did eventually get back to them. I remember them posting, like, they said, hi, we thank you for your interest. We don't currently have anything announced or planned. The usual boilerplate kind of email of, we're not going to say anything, but we appreciate that you're sending this message to us. And like this website was so dedicated that when they announced Mario Hoops 3-on-3 for the DS, it was like front page news on this website because Square was working with Nintendo, which that was actually a huge thing. And I think part of why, it had been so difficult, like you were mentioning with Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, or you're mentioning with Alpha Dream, which made Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, there was like one tiny cameo of Geno in that game, and they had to put like an entire section of the credits specifically, like, we had to go through hoops to get this character for this one thing. Like there was kind of a feeling that there was a burned bridge between Square and Nintendo for a long time after Nintendo insisted that the Nintendo 64 be a cartridge-based platform, which made development of RPGs difficult and ultimately led Square moving over to, Nintendo's newest competitor, PlayStation. So it was like front page news that these two companies were finally working together. And then when they finally got that they finally got that Virtual Console release, that website popped off, and then the admin of the site's like just that old Plankton quote for SpongeBob, like, I don't know what to do now. I didn't think I'd get this far.
Sorry, Pidge. So that being said, now we've had to obviously wait so long for it, and it's been so eagerly anticipated. What do you think?
So, maybe a bit of a controversial opinion here. I have always been of the opinion that SMRPG didn't need to be remade. I think that the game holds up incredibly well today. I think that it is one of the best games on the Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo's library is still fantastic in 2023.
Yes.
A lot of the games in like the 90s on the Super Nintendo chose like art directions that are kind of timeless. Yoshi's Island being one. Mario RPG, like, you could kind of argue one way or the other that it meets that definition. I think that it does, because like pre-rendered graphics are kind of a thing of the past, but the way that they pulled it off in SMRPG makes it look like a claymation game, which I think works really well for like the sense of humor that they have in that game. I think that like SMRPG as a complete game is just like a complete package. It's a perfect time capsule, and it's a perfect time capsule that doesn't like feel dated to play. But the fact that we got a remake means everybody cares about that game again, which means my last 27 years of sending out smoke signals looking for anyone to talk about the game with are finally like reaching people. So and also like this is how I described it last night in Bep's stream. Playing the original SMRPG is like going to my favorite restaurant and eating my favorite meal, and then they come out and they're like, oh, here, by the way, here's a complimentary dessert. It's your favorite dessert, and that's the remake for me.
Nice.
So it's like, it is a wonderful remake. It's faithful. It's a 10 out of 10 remake. They really, really, really tried hard with this remake. I can tell. Because I'm somebody who's like read most of the original game's event code and found like all these obscurities that I've been integrating into the randomizer and like talking about in my trivia series on Twitter. And like every single one of them is in the remake. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I had to work for a very long time to find this, and they also found this. Like, and they kept it in the game. Like, this is amazing. Like, there's an extremely obscure glitch that only happens in the Japanese version of the game, and like, it also happens in the remake for reasons that should never happen on a 3D console, and it feels very intentional. Like, they were just like throwing out all these little call-outs to people who have played the original game and analyzed it to death. It is an absolutely wonderful remake, and I think that like people who really love SMRPG for its technical aspects above everything else might not be like huge on the remake itself, but anybody who loves SMRPG, like for its stories, its characterizations, its settings, its lore, all that kind of stuff, absolutely play the remake at least once. It's wonderful. Nothing will ever dethrone the original game for me, and when I go back to play the original game, like when I was prepping for my GDQ showcase last week, it feels like I'm coming back home. I'm comfortable, the movement feels good, and going to the remake is like, oh, this is fan service that was made just for me. I love it.
I'd like to bring up a point that actually Ghouls just mentioned in chat there about the faithfulness of the remake. I think you mentioned that as well, Ghost, didn't you? Mm-hmm. That it was so faithful. It's actually quite surprising to see something has been recreated so faithfully from the original. One of the reviews I read said something basically that it was quite literally the original game with improved graphics and a couple of tiny little tweaks to the combat system. And honestly, and there's pros and cons to that. I think that's interesting, but what's your take on that, Ghost and Pidge?
My only input on there is I think it's fascinating to remake a game like that, because isometric design was sort of a thing that they did back in the day in like the early to mid 90s, before 3D games really were a full-blown possibility. Like, you look at 3D games on that console, you had like Star Fox, and that game is impressive for its time, but it is definitely primitive 3D technology. And then
aged well.
Yeah, isometric was sort of like isometric was sort of their way of compromising. Like, we're not like, being able to make a 3D game with the technical limitations of the console. So like, remaking an isometric game sounds almost peculiar to me, and like, I'm actually, that's one of the things that I would be interested to hear from somebody who we don't have them on here, but somebody who hasn't played the game, like how they feel about that kind of thing, looking into it. But yeah, you have the floor, Pidge.
So I the way that it feels to me is that the developers of this remake, like they knew like how fanatical SMRPG fans are, and them doing a remake that is so one-to-one in a way that's like kind of over the top. It's like, it is really, really, really one-to-one. Like, every single tiny little interaction and nuance, right down to the stats and the character stat curves and the damage formulas, are all perfectly respected. I think that feels like that's like their way of saying, hey, we see you, SMRPG fans. We know what you've been up to the last 27 years. We know that you love this game exactly the way it was. So here's that. Here, we're giving this to you, but we're making it look really pretty, and adding a couple of things that will enhance your enjoyment of it. That's really how it feels to me, and I think that they made a lot of good choices with it. I think that was probably the best way to do a remake, is just like respecting the source material so to the letter, and building on top of it instead of trying to replace certain things in it that people grew to love after 27 years of playing it over and over and over again. I think that if this like opens the door to like a sequel or something, maybe it wouldn't be isometric, maybe it would be like a different gameplay style, who knows, but they gave us SMRPG the way that we remember it, and they made it like respect what we came to know and love about that game, which I think was like an amazing choice.
Yeah, I concur, and I think it's really cool too, because it's like I know remakes have kind of become a bit more of a touchy subject, especially in video gaming recently. Like, video games are a bit of a peculiar medium in that I compared to something like film, like where people like seem to just groan about remakes more and more these days. Games, it kind of depends here and there. I think for Super Mario RPG, having a remake is really cool because its original platform was something that old, and cartridges of the English version of that game go for pretty high prices, partially just due to the nature of the market of that, but also it's an old system. So it gives that opportunity for like a new audience, whether it be, young kids who never got to experience the original and kind of get to see, that wonderful little world that it has, or, even adults who never got to play the game can still find enjoyment out of it, because the Switch is just, there's a Switch in like 1 in every 2 households. So I'm just kind of interested to see like how people who didn't play the game originally feel about the remake, because like you said, there's a lot of it I think that is very timeless.
Coming back round to the sort of faithfulness again, I think part of the reason, just from my own opinion, that this is so faithful, as you said, Pidge, very much 1-to-1, is probably almost certainly because of the passionate fan base, because of the fact that there was petitions for it for many years, because there were so many, because there was a very, very vibrant, strong speedrunning community, which yourself obviously has contributed towards in a huge way. It is when you think of RPGs, even I think perhaps, but obviously we're kind of on the inside a little bit, so we're obviously more familiar with RPGs in general. But I honestly think if you were to say, about RPGs, anybody who's heard about the genre or played down RPGs, Super Mario RPG has to be in the conversation as one of the better or best ones, even for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And I think it's that passion that they're obviously the developers of the remake have taken and run with, probably because maybe they think that people would not expect anything less. And in a way, it's great to see.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I definitely agree, and I think that something that I think like is especially true of SMRPG is that like the passion of the fans kind of reflects the passion that the developers had. SMRPG as a game was like, it's just a game that you can really tell the people who worked on it really, really cared about what they were making. Like they were making art, and like they approached it that way. SMRPG's original development staff in the 90s was like, I don't want to say Square's B team, because that sounds like they were all exceptionally talented, but like most of Square's most experienced staff was working on FF7 at the same time. So they had this team working on SMRPG who ended up producing like one of the greatest games ever made, in my opinion. Everybody on that team was a stand-up comedy fan. Which really shows in a lot of the game's writing and its slapstick and like the subtle humor that it imbues into like all of the minor details in the game. This was only one of the two directors, Fujioka. This is only his second time directing a game. His first one was Final Fantasy Legend 3, and this was also like a big deal for him because this was an important business partner for Square, coming to them and basically handing them the reins for their biggest IP. So the SMRPG development team was like, we are not taking this assignment lightly. Like, that is a lot of pressure. And they ended up like acting on that and making an absolutely wonderful, fantastic game that all the love they poured into it translated into how much love all the fans have for the game and have continued to have for 27 years. And I think that the new developers, I don't know how to pronounce the names, Arte Piazza?
I assume so. They're the ones who did like the Dragon Quest remake. So like when I saw that name, I was like kind of happy to see that, because they have generally done very good quality, faithful remakes on newer platforms. That's kind of their bread and butter, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Like the DQ remakes are really good. So like them being in charge of SMRPG and making it so faithful is like, all of the special things that went into, like all of the passion that went into the 1996 version, like you can still see it in the new version, in the remake. It's like, because they made such a one-to-one remake, it's like there's that timelessness of all that wonderful work that the original development team did, and it really carries over and shines into the remake, especially like when the localization is basically one-to-one with the one that Woolsey did in 1996. And I think that is one of the best decisions they could have made for that game, because like some of my friends who are like fluent in both Japanese and English think that it's like they said to me like the English localization is like it's an improvement on the source material. Like it is such a good localization that it's like really great that it was kept. It just adds so much character to the universe, and it is almost like looking back in time to see how did Peach and Bowser get their personalities. This is the game that gave them their personalities. It's right there. It's on our Switch now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was kind of one of the things that I noticed was really like, because my first Mario RPG exposure was Paper Mario. I didn't have a SNES growing up, so Super Mario RPG came later from a friend who had, told me about the game. And it is interesting looking back on it, because I remember seeing some videos of people talking about how much, the game meant to them. And one of the things they often brought up was it was like the first game that really explored the like world of Mario, because up until then there was like Mario Kart, which was just a bunch of racetracks. There was the 2D platformers, which they were very full of life when you got to games like Mario 3 and Super Mario World. But, they were just, you go from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen and very little text in between for flavor. There was, Yoshi's Island, which is a gorgeous game, but again, going from left to right. This was like the first game that said like, here's what the personalities of these characters kind of are. And like, I mean, those change a little bit over the years, but I think they've kept a lot of that throughout the series. Like Bowser's always been like just this kind of like, you got this sense of him being like this menacing evil demon for the longest time, but then like you get to this game and he's just a goofball.
Yeah.
On that, very quickly, somebody mentioned earlier on in chat that they reckon the best version of Bowser was the Super Mario RPG Bowser. And honestly, I would probably agree with that. And I think it's been so key to the establishment of Bowser sort of going forward. I mean, I see a lot of that Bowser in, for example, Super Mario Odyssey's Bowser. You see a lot of that sort of side of him, And again, it's absolutely fantastic that it allowed these characters. And then, sorry, we're going off topic slightly here, but then you've got unique characters. You've got Gino, you've got Mallow, and Gino for Smash. I mean, let's be honest. Yeah?
Oh, those petitions went on forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I would argue that I think I like seeing like maybe the Bowser's Inside Story or Super Paper Mario versions of Bowser, but I don't think we get to that without Super Mario RPG. So, take your pick there.
Yeah, on the topic of how Bowser is kind of characterized in SMRPG, I think that the characterizations of Bowser and Peach in SMRPG are like particularly genius. Bowser being like an emotionally vulnerable goofball like really helps to serve it really helps to drive like the overarching narrative of the story in a way, because like you said, Bowser in like the 2D platformers was this like menacing demon who was like he was the final boss. He was the big baddie. He was like the fascist that was taking over the Mushroom Kingdom. And then in SMRPG, like he's like a person. You get to know him. You actually get to. He doesn't seem so threatening anymore, and that's good, because the whole point of SMRPG's story is that it makes all Mario's problems that he's been dealing with in the first 3 games feel like small fries compared to this much bigger threat that is terrorizing their whole world. Like, the Mushroom Kingdom is an actual place that you can visit now. It's not just a place you hear about in the instruction manual. Bowser joins your team, and there's like a force from another dimension that's not only threatening you, but also him. It's like, well, if this guy can kick out Bowser, then he's been a thorn in my side for so long. What does that mean for me? I think that like the fact that like Bowser kind of being contrast to Smithy in terms of like just how evil this guy is, also kind of like makes the entire world of SMRPG like more meaningful, because like one of my good friends, Seventh Sam, said to me on a stream one time that a villain is only as good as what it threatens. And in SMRPG, like, you go to places like Star Hill and you learn that, like, okay, this is actually a world where people love each other. They have hopes and dreams. Like, this is a world worth saving. Yeah, and that's like amplified by the fact that, like, what was the biggest threat in Mario's entire universe up until this point was the guy who's crying because everyone's ignoring him standing next to you. like the stakes are very, very high in SMRPG, and I think that those stakes would not feel as high without Bowser being the way that he is. Yeah. What if you're like coming into the game for having played previous Mario titles?
Yeah, kind of the thing also kind of interested to me is like, not only was it like really the first expansion of the Mario universe, which kind of de facto as RPGs tend to be, but from what I've gathered, this game, like, this was before Final Fantasy VII truly like pushed the JRPG into a like global, phenomenon. I think one of the things that I found really fascinating about Mario RPG was it came out, it was, as far as I understand, the best-selling RPG on the SNES, which is a fascinating thing, or at least in the West. And when I say the West, I mean North America, because unfortunately Europe got like nothing.
It wasn't out in Europe.
But I think what fascinates me about that game is like Square really wanted to make an RPG that, got people into the genre in the 90s. Like, they had Final Fantasy 2 and 3, which we later find out were 4 and 6, and we had Chrono Trigger, and they wanted those games to sell, but like they caught on amongst like a cult fan base, but they never really broke out. Enix, being their greatest competitor at the time, they tried and they set up a North American branch, but they ended up folding, and that was a big part of why the United States never got Terra Enigma, for instance, because Enix had struggled to break the RPG genre into the West. Square tried with Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, and they tried with, to a lesser extent, with Final Fantasy 2 on the SNES, being like a dumbed down version. Like, they didn't know how to get people into RPGs. And I think kind of what made Mario RPG different is it is an accessible game. It's not a particularly difficult game, but it's not one that feels like it's trying to like dumb RPGs down for you. Rather, it's giving like this, this like familiar, this familiar visage with the Mario, aesthetic and Mario characters and all that. But by that point, those were ubiquitous. And putting them in this world, and like exposing people to RPGs, because like it is at its core an RPG. Like, jump is an element in that game if you think about it. And it was faithful to like what made Mario Mario. Is that like when they were originally doing the game, they had no idea how to make a Mario RPG. I remember seeing some interviews, and they're saying like, do we give him a sword and armor? It doesn't really sound like Mario. And instead they gave him like boots and a hammer, and it just worked out very well.
Yeah, the interview that you're talking about happened during the game's first public demo. Well, the first time that it was announced, it was at the V-Jump Festival in 1995. Miyamoto and Fujioka were both performing that demo, and they were still like kind of in two minds about what they should do with the gameplay style in that regard. Like, so at one point, Fujioka said to Miyamoto, like, okay, well, why don't I just ask the audience which one they like better? And he did that. And he told people to like clap and cheer for whichever one you like better. Do you think that Mario should use swords and shields? There was like, there's a little bit of applause. But do you think now that he should attack people with hammers and by jumping on them? And then the crowd just went, woo, yeah! Like, just big cheers. So like, okay, well, I guess that's the direction we're gonna go with. Mm-hmm. And that's just like one of the many things that I feel like just made SMRPG so special, was that they were always thinking about things like that. And Mario RPG was like kind of a game that needed to exist in 1996 because, like you said, Square had tried so hard to find mainstream success in the West that their competitor Enix had found in the East, that they had also found in the East with games like Final Fantasy, like you had mentioned.
Oh, Dragon Quest is huge in Japan. I still wish it would kept on here. It's at least got some of that charm.
Dragon Quest was struggling at first in Japan. And the reason that stopped, like, people would pick up Dragon Quest and have no idea how to play it, and and it wasn't selling very much, and that changed because, like, they decided to meet the kids where they were already at and put all this Dragon Quest content in Shonen Jump, because Toriyama worked on Shonen Jump. So they started putting all these Dragon Quest like artwork and content and how to play the game guides, and then Dragon Quest started flying off the shelves. And then RPGs were like the next big thing in Japan. And in the West, we didn't have anything like that. We didn't have our own Shonen Jump. None of our gaming magazines hit that kind of circulation. So it took Square a while to figure out what their in was to get to the kids the same way that Enix did in Japan. In 1995, they realized that in was that the West was obsessed with Mario. They put Mario on the box, people would buy it. We bought Mario lunch boxes, Mario macaroni. We bought Mario everything. We're gonna buy a game with Mario on it, and it worked. It exceeded sales expectations. It introduced all the Nintendo loyalists who didn't have a PS1 to play FF7 on to the world of RPGs. And it's like it is a game that needed to exist after MQ failed to do what they were trying to do. Like, why don't we just put Mario on the box? Mm-hmm. There they go.
I think that's a very good point, because, as you say, it was leveraging the sort of brand of Mario, because obviously we're talking sort of mid-90s here, and Mario was probably, in terms of at that stage, obviously at its peak of sort of visibility. And I think one of the things that I was attracted to when I first heard of Mario RPG, many, many years later, of course, because it never came out in the UK, was the fact, hang on, they're putting Mario in an RPG. How on earth is that supposed to work? And as you rightly say, they took that formula, they took the RPG formula, and I agree it is an RPG, but it isn't a dumbed down RPG, it's just a slightly different. And for me, I want to call out one of the mechanics that I really like in the game, and obviously it's been followed through into the remake, and maybe get your thoughts on this, Pidge, as well, why you think Mario RPG was so influential overall, is timed hits for me. Timed hits, if you compare Mario RPG and compare it to something like Final Fantasy, so one of the earlier Final Fantasies, you hit fight, you hit cast, whatever, but in Mario RPG you have that extra level of interaction. You have your timed hits for your attacks, you have your timed hits for your defense. So I think that is actually one of the key parts of its sort of success, and of course it then went on to see it in Paper Mario, Mario and Luigi, etc., etc. That's kind of like a big deal for SMRPG, is the timed hits engine. I think that's kind of like what made it so successful, because that had never been done in a game before, really. Like, the earliest known example of, like, press the button at the right time is in, like, a 1982 arcade game, and that was more press the button to not get a game over than press a button to do more damage. SMRPG kind of, like, invented that system as we know it today, because the one of the directors, Yoshihiko Maekawa, he wanted to find a way to reduce the monotony of turn-based RPGs and make it so that, like, you can never really go on autopilot, and because if you go on autopilot, it doesn't feel like you're playing a Mario game. He wanted to add another level of interaction, and he was, like, in a toy store looking for something for his kid, and he saw, like, a toy that played music, and you had to press buttons to the tune of the music, and that inspired him to make the timed hit system in SMRPG, which now we have in, like, all the Paper Mario games, like the Mario and Luigi games. We have it in Shadow Hearts. We have it in, like, Gears of War, for crying out loud. Gears of War has a timed hit system in it. It's like it is ever since just, like, spread all throughout, like, the gaming world. It was, like, such an influential thing that is still felt like everywhere today.
Yeah, like it kind of, like, timed hits kind of became, like, a huge thing in indie RPGs. Like I got this little guy here. This is Leaf from Bug Fables, which, if you don't know Bug Fables, that is a game that exists because of a dev team that really wanted another Mario RPG, specifically something closer to a Paper Mario, but, like, those weren't being made by Nintendo. Alpha Dream had, like, they were in their remake phase. They hadn't released a new game in years, and, you know, people wanted new, like, Paper Mario. They wanted new games of that, like, charming, you know, enjoyable RPGs that use that kind of combat system, and there just wasn't that for the longest time. And, like, now that we're getting back-to-back remakes, it's sort of, I'm not going to say Nintendo going back to that, because what it is effectively just remakes, but, you know, I want to see these games do well, because that does mean that it shows, you know, that there is this market there. Like, Bug Fables became like a 500,000 seller almost, I want to say. Like, there is that market for that, and it's like, if Nintendo isn't making it, somebody else is beating them to it.
Just to pivot slightly then onto a slightly different topic, I'd like to move on to talk a little bit, if you don't mind, Pidge, about your exploits in the randomizer community, because I know that you are one of the big driving forces behind Super Mario RPG randomizers. You've done an amazing amount of work behind the scenes to get that going and to make it as popular and well used as it is. Anything you'd like to sort of talk about how you got into the randomizer side and how you sort of progressed on that?
Oh, yeah, sure. I can talk a bit about that. I'm actually I've put randomizer dev on a bit of a hiatus now, just because anything I do with it right now is going to be overshadowed by the fact that we got a remake for this game yesterday. So I've been working on a major overhaul of the randomizer code for the last couple of years, because it's really I can't just bring someone into my code and be like, hey, here's this half-baked code that doesn't make any sense if you read it. I swear to God, it'll be done soon. So it's really a one-person job right now. But once I am finished writing the framework and adapting the existing code to that framework, then I can put it out and be like, hey, everybody, contribute to my code. What I've done is basically, if you've ever used the lazy shell editor, you can look at a lot of the game's event code, and I've built a Python framework that kind of mimics the lazy shell editor, which is how a lot of people get their start in SMRPG ROM hacking. So it's you go into the code and you start cutting and pasting commands, and there's guardrails to make sure you're doing it correctly, so that you can start making randomizer features. Because most of all of the game's internal logic is based on that particular scripting engine. I got into it about 5 years ago because randomizers were kind of entering their golden age in 2017.
I remember Limit Break 2017, and that was when Zelda Link to the Past randomizer broke. Yeah, you were there. I'm sure you probably saw half the TVs in the practice room were just Zelda randomizers.
I was there, and my boyfriend Sean Cass, who was my best friend at the time, he was really into Link to the Past randomizer, because at the time the randomizer was built by speedrunners for speedrunners.
Right.
And
I think your files said, hey, Sean Cass, when's rando during your run?
Yeah, because I wanted him to play SMRPG randomizer with me. I'd literally mailed him a Wii that he could play it on, because back then FX Pack Pro didn't support it. So anyway, now he lives in my apartment, and if I make a new feature, he's the first one to see it.
Awesome.
So yeah. So at the time, we were thinking, how can we make a randomizer work for SMRPG? Because there was one that Abyssinem made, but it was a command line randomizer that randomized your stats, randomized enemy stats, things like that. It was still the linear game. We wanted to try something different, more free enterprise style. So Dorkmaster Fleck and Alanim released an early version of the rando with input from some people in the SMRPG speedrunning community about how to make this work in an open world format. And so they made SMRPG Randomizer, and that became pretty popular for a little while. And then as we got more and more players who were finding more and more bugs, wanted more and more features, it became too much work. And that's when, so I was I want to help you guys. I don't know any Python, but I'll learn it to help with this project. So that's how I got into it. At the time before that, I was we were talking about the boss shuffle mechanic and how HP stat scaling should work, and I think I'm the one that developed the algorithm for that. I contributed the code that puts the proper boss sprite in the overworld where a boss should be, and a lot of it is just because I love SMRPG speedrunning, and some of the things that make you good at speedrunning can also really help you in the randomizer. I'm most of the stuff speedrunner. I ran that category in 2019, and just knowing where everything is in the game is going to make the randomizer a lot easier for you, especially if you know how to get all that stuff really fast. So it's cool. Like, the concept was that we open up the world map. You can go anywhere on the world map and start. You don't know which bosses have your 7-star pieces, and you got to find them. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff randomized here and there in between. So it's like you know how open world randomizers are. That's pretty much the concept. So eventually, like, the way that we were doing the randomizer back then was we were just like hard patching values like in the game's event code, and that eventually got to a point where it was untenable because some more complicated features that we wanted to make like would need different commands inserted, which would take up more space, which would shift everything else down, which would mess up every address in the game. So that's why I started that's why I kind of took it away and started making this new framework that just lets you build the whole event script engine, the whole event script bank like on the fly, so that when you randomize the game, it just rewrites all the game's event code according to what your randomizer says should be in it. Nice. And that's like taken me a while to write because I have to write like an entire framework to match like a 1996 game. But I am working on it. Like it's not that project is it's a lot of work, and that's why it's taken me this long to release it, because like I have other SMRPG projects going on at the same time that I can't announce yet, but that you'll all be really excited by when I can. But those other projects also have deadlines I have to meet, so they take like a little bit priority over the randomizer for me right now. But I kind of like try to work on everything in tandem, like do a bit by bit every day, see what I can get done. So it's just like, it's a lot of work, but it's all fun.
And so you mentioned most of the stuff run. I think probably the thing I would imagine a lot of the audience here is most knows you for, especially when you get to you putting this on YouTube, is your runs of any percent in 2017 and most of the stuff, aka pseudo 100% from 2019. So like what is it that drew you to like speed running this game, and was this your first speed game, or was this like something that came later because you got into speed running and then you wanted to run this childhood classic?
It was my first game. The story of how I got into it is kind of funny. Like I said at the start of the podcast, I felt like for all these years, I was just trying to find other people on the internet who wanted to talk about SMRPG, because it's like all I ever want to talk about. So that's around when I got into Twitch, like around 2013, 2014. That's like when I Eat Your Pie was running any percent. And I would watch his stream, and occasionally he would race against Millennium, who ran SMRPG at Limit Break this year. Which was a great run. If you didn't see it, go back and watch it. So I thought that was fascinating. It's like, oh, this is really cool, this SMRPG speedrun. The chat is full of SMRPG speedrun fans. I feel like this is a place that I should be hanging out. So I would just like lurk there and just like watch SMRPG. I had SMRPG content to watch. I was happy. And around 2015-ish, early 2015, I was working at a film studio. I was a production person on a kids' TV show about video games, and one of my coworkers there, she was awesome. Like, we would hang out outside of work and things like that, and I was like streaming Smash Bros at the time, and I was thinking, like, I feel like I kind of want to stream SMRPG sometime. She's like, if you do, I would watch it. And I'm like, okay, awesome. I'll stream SMRPG tonight then. So and I said, you know what? I'll try doing. A bunch of people told me on Twitter that I can't like beat the game without using any equips, and I'm like, no, I did it twice, man. I just did it off stream. Here, I'll do it tonight. So I started a new like beat the game without using any equipment or doing any level grinding run, and partway through that run, like, Millennium comes to my channel. I've never talked to him before, but he's like, whoa, what's this? And I'm like, hey, wait a sec, I remember your name. Aren't you friends with Pi? Like, don't you race him on his channel sometimes? And I started, like, going to the speedrun IRC a bit, and Millennium would say to me, like, a couple times, like, hey, you should try speedrunning the game. Like, you clearly, like, know how, like, stuff about the game. I think you should try it out. And I'm like, man, are you kidding? I would never be good at that. I just like watching you guys do it. And but one day, I don't remember what exactly it was he said, but one day, like, I thought about what he was saying to me, and I'm like, okay, you know what? 2016, my New Year's resolution, I'll learn the run and I'll do a run, and that'll be my goal. So yeah, I did that, and then I did it again, and I did it again, and then I did it again, then I did it in a marathon. And here we are in 2023.
Nice.
I decided, like, when I picked up SMRPG, I was gonna go all out with it. So, like, I got a Japanese cartridge. I learned how to do 100 super jumps, and that was the route that I learned, Japanese 100 super jumps. I didn't start with, like, any of, like, the quote-unquote easier routes. I never ran it in English. But something else kind of special that happened around that time was that as soon as my, like, cartridge arrived and I did, like, day one SMRPG speedrun learning, that's when, like, the guy who would eventually become my boyfriend, like, found my stream for the first time.
Hi.
He came into my chat, like, when I was fighting Hammer Bros, and I was, like, not blocking Hammer Time correctly. I'm like, oh, that's probably not that important. I'll learn it later. And his first message to me, I'm not kidding, was, blocking Hammer Time is important. I'm like, wait, I recognize your name from the leaderboards. What are you doing watching my stream? I don't know nothing about this speedrun. And he's like somebody who just likes going around on Twitch to the directories of games that he knows. And if anyone's trying to learn the run, he'll try to help them. So I was that day's lucky person. I was really receptive to his tips, and he thought it was cool that he would give me like one small pointer. I would try it, and then suddenly this tech would click for me. I'd be like, oh my god, that's so cool! And he loved that. That made him happy, so he kept coming around, and then eventually he convinced me to go to GDQ, and we met at GDQ and became best friends after that. And we were best friends for about another 6 years. I mean, we still are, but now we've also been dating for 2 years on top of that. So it's like, yeah, that's like my... So the moral of the story is, speedrun your favorite game. You never know what's going to happen to you when you do it.
Yeah. Ghoul who put on this who like put on this whole thing to begin with has kind of almost a similar story. Yeah, fun things happen when you meet some interesting people at events. I might be wrong about this, but I think I actually streamed the game myself casually in like 2016, and I'm pretty sure you showed up in my chat like at one point asking me about the game. I didn't recognize you, but then like I remember you talking about it. I'm like, was that the person who was in my Mario RPG stream chat? Because that was like my first year of streaming, and then I met you. Yeah, I met you at AGDQ 2017, and you were like, one of your things at that event was just hanging out in the practice room, showing people how to do super jumps. So what was that like?
Yeah. Oh, that was cool because a couple of those guys I actually convinced to join the community race we had on a few days later.
Awesome.
It was really fun. So when I first got into SMRPG speedrunning, as soon as I hit 100 super jumps the first time, I made a tutorial video about it. Because I thought, if I make a tutorial video like 3 years from now and I'm really good at it, I'm not going to understand the mentality of someone who's just still learning the tech. But I do right now, so I'm going to make a tutorial video about it. And
nice.
That eventually like paved the way to like me being the primary editor of the speedrun wiki and making a bunch of practice tools like the damage calculator and the time. And well, I didn't make the time hits repository. Kairolius made it, but I put together a team to finish it. So speedruns for me now, while I'm on hiatus working on other projects, are like a problem for me to solve. So like I'm building a damage calculator for the remake, I'm building a time hits repository for the remake, I'm trying to like help enable speedrunners to like do their best work. So yeah, that's like kind of where it's at right now. People are trying to go for this like $1,000 bounty if they can hold a record for 20 days of under 4 hours. So I'm over here like trying to help them figure out like optimal battle strategies, because the remake more or less ports everything over 1-to-1, but now you also have factors like if you have a time hit chain, if you have this one is wild. If you have a chain of 5 time hits in a row or more, like your chain on the left says 5+, that's the max you get, and you have Mallow in your party at any time, everyone in your party gets a 25% boost of their magic attack. And you know what magic attack controls? It controls super jumps and ultra jumps. And ultra jumps, which have the same frame window as super jumps and are the same speed. Well, they might not have the same frame window, but they're still easier than the original game. In the original game, there were 2 frames. There are not 2 frames in the remake. That is, like, that's a lot. Not only does the 25% boost get applied to your magic power, it also gets applied to the equipment that you put on that boosts your magic power. So... if you thought super jumps were broken in the original game, you are in for some fun stuff going on in this game. Especially because super jumps are easier now. Like, everyone in this chat can get a super suit like tomorrow.
Honey, where's my super suit? I always want to quote that anytime I hear super suit. Yeah, it was I remember how excited you were because, like, I think one time because I joined in the practicing super jumps, and I think one time I was able to pull off like a 20 super jump, and I remember your mantra, like to this day, something like, if you can do 15 super jumps, you can do 100 in the original.
Oh, that's like that's a mantra that's passed down from speedrunners before me. The SMRPG speedrunning actually has like a very interesting history, and that's just like a mantra that I learned from other speedrunners who've been running it longer than I have. I was just the person that was at AGDQ 2017 instilling that knowledge into people, but I definitely like learned it from my predecessors.
Just to interject here very quickly, you mentioned there one of the things that I think is perhaps a bit underrated, not just, and this is slightly off topic, is you talked about the development work you do behind the scenes, Paige, in terms of speedrunning. So your damage calculators and your timed hits, sort of libraries and stuff. And I think that's something that perhaps certainly casual viewers don't understand, that they think, oh, somebody's just speedruns this game. There isn't, but there are people who dedicate themselves to actually breaking the games, to actually finding the tech, finding the glitch hunters, all this sort of stuff. And I even today, I still don't think that perhaps sometimes these people get their fair due, because there's so much, as you say, the community, especially a community like Super Mario RPG, when there is so much to sort of dig in under the hood, if you like. I think that a lot of people only see the finished product. I don't necessarily see all the effort and work that goes into it. What would you say to that?
I would say that like one of the best things you can do as a speedrun fan is like try to find out who those people were, because like I think that like glitch hunting and making tools and things like that is one of the most underappreciated skills that we have in the community, and like the names of the people who find those things like rarely ever end up being known, like as generations come and go through, like you inherit all this tech, you inherit a speedrun route, but you don't know who made it. So in SMRPG, like some of the OG routers would be like, for a long time, there was a Japanese runner, Raku, who had a 255, and Cypher was like trying to break the 255, and this was like before we had Peach Chart, and like eventually like Checkers ended up beating it because we didn't have Bowser Door in it back then, and he got a run where he got all 4 Bowser Doors correct, like just randomly. And then we had people like Claude and Oxwas. Like Oxwas is definitely a glitch hunter in SMRPG. When I did my glitch showcase last week, I talked to him first to see, like, I showed him a big list of what I planned on doing, and he had a couple more suggestions for me, and he knows how a lot of them work under the hood, and I know how a lot of them work under the hood, so together, like, we put together a really good list, and he is someone that, like, will mess around with the game a lot. He's actually the one that I think discovered Swap Glitch.
Wasn't he the first person to task the game as well?
I think so. I think, yeah, he eventually took record from Checkers. He got a 251, I think, after Bowser Door Manip and Swap Glitch were found. 1 second. So, something in SMRPG that, like, that you can do, in Barrel Volcano specifically, if you have an EXP star, you can turn around, and with some pretty tight movement, you can actually leave Barrel Volcano before your EXP star runs out. Most of the EXP stars in the game provide safeguards against that, but that one doesn't. So Oxwas was doing, I think, that one, and he found out that it went into a different area. He could open the menu before the actual timer ran out and did the level up screen. And that was like how Swap Glitch was found. And Claude experimented with it some more and found that you could just do it by jumping under an EXP star box, because the game locks you out of pressing X when you have an EXP star, so to prevent you from switching your characters around, because the devs like did try to prevent you from doing this exact glitch. But if you jump and press X mid-jump, pressing X does a fade-out animation before it opens your menu, and Mario completes his jump and opens the box before that fade-out animation completes, and the menu is like already buffered to be opened. So Claude found that, and that's like swap glitch as we know it today, and why it's used in the speedrun. And that blew everything wide open because Peach joins your party at level 9. She's a higher level than everyone else. She has incredible magic power at just being higher than everyone else. She has a really big stat curve. So teaching her like a spell, like an offense spell from Mallow, who's much lower level, just that completely changed the SMRPG routing. Like from then on, where that was kind of one of the pivotal moments in history from the work of those two people and everyone else around them who was like contributing stuff. Like Elenim found the new max skip setup. Things like that. Swinch found the knife guy great guy manip. Feralius works on a lot of low level manips, and a lot of these runners like don't really run the game that much anymore, but they're still like hard at work finding stuff. And also like on the point of swap glitch, like completely changing the speedrun route. That is something that I think is really cool to talk about, because now that we have SMRPG Remake, as faithful as it is, there are some very, very minor changes to the game which affect things that majorly define the SNES speedrun route, like your inventory size, or the fact that you can't do swap glitch anymore, or the fact that you can't do max skip. Things are going to be very different in the remake, and also stuff like you can change your party mid-battle. That was never a thing in the original game. So there's still a reason to speedrun the original game, and I love that. This is the future I wanted.
Yeah, and I was talking briefly with Spike Vegeta in his chat, because I mean he does like a low level run every year, and kind of one of the things I know he was saying he was kind of hoping for was that it wasn't just going to be a, like, as much as we say faithful, it's not going to be like a 1-to-1 remake of the speed run. Because what tends to also happen with newer games, they tend to be longer and they end up falling off. So it's nice that there's going to be those differences with the speed run between current version and the original. Something I actually kind of was interested in asking is specifically about the original, though, is you've touched on like some of the glitches and some of the route changes. One of the things I've always found interesting about Super Mario RPG as a speed run is, among all of the Mario RPG runs, despite it being the oldest and on the simplest hardware, it has generally been the hardest one to like completely break wide open. Like if you look at 10 years ago, Paper Mario, the category, like that game was like 3+ hours. Then they found Blue House Skip, and then they found, Peach Warp, and then that turned into an under 100-minute speed run. Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, Palace Skip, and all that stuff and Ultra Hammer early cut the run in half. You have Superstar Saga, which has been a broken mess since about as long as people have been speedrunning it. You have Partners in Time, which the TTYD people got bored breaking that one, and then they cut Partners in Time almost in half. But despite all of that, 10, almost 15 years ago, like Mario RPG was about a 3-hour run, and to this day it's about a 3-hour run. A lot of the skips have been in the smaller things. I know you've worked more on the code. What is it about the original game that has made it so hard to like break, to find like some sort of arbitrary code execution or some like massive skip?
So I think that like one of the big differences is that, especially when comparing to Paper Mario, like early N64 was very like scrappy, very like rudimentary early 3D work. So you have things like where you can like the meme, like clip into a house, or like everyone says about DK64, like walls are just a suggestion. And in SMRPG, the way that you can interact with your terrain is like very, very binary, like very prescriptive. Like you're not, unless you can do like some arbitrary code execution, which we haven't found yet, you're not really going to see Mario like clip into a house or anything like that, because like the terrain just will not let him do it. There's no like corners where he can bust between two walls, because those walls are like very, very rigidly defined in the isometric 3D platform of SMRPG. Like the whole game is just like tile data projected over like a solidity map. So most of like what we find is just like in the game's event code, like where can we get around event loading zones? How can we set a variable to manipulate, to exploit the fact that this variable is used again later? And there's not a whole lot of that because the developers for SMRPG, like, I don't know how long they had to make this game, but it feels like they QA'd it like really hardcore. When I did that glitch exhibition last week, I showed off 2 major glitches and 25 minor glitches. And the minor glitches are all stuff like the sprite loads backwards when you sleep in the hotel, or you phase through this guy because he disables his collision data to prevent you from soft locking, or this NPC opens a door but only opens it like only affects the tile map. So like if you've already opened the door, you just phase in and out of the door tile. It's all like extremely inconsequential stuff. The game as we know it right now is like pretty rock solid. They even tried to prevent you from doing max skip. It's just the barrier that they put up was just slightly too short. So that's part of it. Like I've looked through the code, some parts of the code, and I've been like genuinely impressed at what they anticipated players would try to do and how they tried to prevent it. Like how I mentioned that Ox was found swap glitch from backtracking out of like a particular part of the game. If you backtrack out of Vero Volcano, it works. If you backtrack out of the sea, it doesn't, because like the developers put in safeguards that nullify your EXP start as soon as you enter the trampoline room, and you can't get out of there fast enough to exit to the world map. But no such safeguard exists in Vero Volcano because your movement has to be extremely, extremely tight to get there in the first place. So it's just things like that. Like they were very cautious. They knew what gamers were like, and they knew that that people who play Mario games in particular are always part of what informs the game's development is that people who play Mario games are always looking for secrets. That's like an intentional design thing from Miyamoto. He's like, wait, the essence of a Mario game is that like 9 times out of 10 the game is going to tell you to go to the right, but 1 time out of 10 we want to reward the players who decide to go left. And when they built SMRPG, they expected it was going to be played by Mario players who are always trying to go to the left, and RPG players who played FF6 and looked everywhere for hidden passageways. And so you end up with a product like this where the secrets that you find are very intentional, and there's not a lot you're going to find that was unintentional.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting seeing how that's really informed their design philosophy. Like even today, if you look at Odyssey, there's some sections of that game, it's like amazing that you can even get there with that movement engine, and then you get there and there's like a big old fat stack of coins there to say like, hey, we thought somebody might try this. Here's your little reward as like our acknowledgement of you as a player for getting good at this game, and like really, trying to get to every corner of the game. So yeah, it is interesting to see like how that ended up being the case. So we are saying like a 3-hour speed run of the original, but so far like it seems like people have already gotten to work on the remake. What is the remake looking like so far? At least I know we're only a couple days in, but
so some of the major factors that are going to distinguish Remake from the OG is that like being able to swap your party members out is a big one, because like I was saying about how Mallow buffs your magic attack, like that powers up super jumps. That's huge. If Mallow's not in your party, it's weaker, but you can swap your characters in willy-nilly, so you can kind of like bring people in for whatever you need to make a certain attack powerful than it would normally be. That I think is going to change a lot of boss fight routing. The fact that like you're not restricted to 3 people is also going to make like SWAT equipment a little more nuanced. The movement is a bit different, which I think is why I'm going to ultimately end up preferring OG SNES speedrunning, which don't let that sour your opinion of the game. Like, Remake is wonderful. I think it's going to be a very interesting speedrun. Just I feel better moving around in the original game, because in the original game, you know how you climb to get 5 frog coins? So here's how you cheat. This isn't really cheating, it's just a game mechanic. Instead of jumping diagonally, just hold right or just hold up and you slide along the wall, and you are just as fast as if you are running diagonally. In the remake, that's not the case. If you try to slide against a wall using cardinal direction, you are actually slower than if you're running diagonally. Running into walls and stuff like that slows you down. So it doesn't feel like you can just use cardinal directions to optimize like how you brush against everything. You have to actually run around everything, and it's a little bit jarring to me. That's going to change like how you move in the remake. A skip has been found in Belome Temple. It's a minor skip. It just lets you skip the fortune sequence, which saves you some money. You can't. But the biggest change so far that I can see that is going to really, really, really affect the remake run being a whole different thing on its own. You know the seaside menu in OG, like like whenever I run the game, I'm like, here's the hardest menu in the game. FF9 runners, don't laugh at me, please. That menu is not really going to be a thing, because what do we do in seaside menu? We sell our flower boxes, we sell our flower jars, we sell our flower tabs, we sell our red essence freebies, we sell a whole bunch of equipment. You can't sell any of that in the remake. You can't sell flower boosting items, which is like our primary source of money in the original game to buy bombs with. And those bombs make it fast to get through King Calamari, to get through the Land's End Ants, to get through Gunyolk and Zardragon and Mega Smilax. And we don't really have the assets to buy those anymore, so we're going to have to like come up with something different. Luckily, the remake offers you things like, the bombs are used against Yuridovich as well. That's another important one, because Yuridovich is a very hard fight. Like, that is kind of like a minor difficulty spike in the game. I wouldn't really call it a difficulty spike. It's just he's beefy. So we use bombs. Well, we don't really have bombs anymore. But luckily, Mallow is overpowered with his electric damage, which Yuridovich is weak to, so you can use him. And if you also have a triple tech built up by then, you can do Mario Mallow Bowser, which does elemental damage to him that he's weak to, and hits him with a barrage of it. So that will kind of help you make up for some of the damage that you lose from ice bombs. But still not really sure what to do yet about some of those other things that we need bombs for. We're going to have to go back to the drawing board.
Mallow is overpowered. 3 words I never thought I'd hear about. A non-randomized version of RPG.
Love it.
Say 3 words to scare an OGS RPG runner. Mallow is OP. Like that's. Although most of the stuff runners already knew that, but.
Just to throw in, notice chat's mentioned them there, Pidge. Triple attacks, do you reckon they're going to have any influence on the speedrun, or was it too early to say?
I don't know yet, because like they seem much better in the early game than the late game, but they might help you get out of a jam sometimes. Like some of the triple attacks are defensive. Like there's one that gives you a party shield that I think protects you from a few attacks completely. There's one that does a full party heal, including anybody on your back line who might be KO'd. I think that like those things will be very strategic, or if you like really need to do a little bit more lightning damage to your Yuridovich, for example, I think it might be useful there. Other than that, I think like the late game, you're probably going to get more mileage out of just like abusing the super suit and like your ally buffs when you have the chain damage. Like you get a chain of 5 time hits and time blocks, and then you're at your max power. Like it's really easy to get there, but it's also going to make it more important that like you can't drop any timed hits if you want to get through the boss the way you're supposed to.
It is interesting hearing you talk about, one change to the game means like, oh, well, that has consequences and ramifications for this fight, and then this fight, and then this fight. It's kind of one of the things that's just fascinating to me about RPG speedruns in general. And it's like, because you look at a standard Mario game, it's like, if a new strat is found for a given stage, in most games, it's generally not going to have long-lasting ramifications. Maybe in something like 3D World, if you skip getting one of the green stars, you have to get another one somewhere else. But like that's the most serious ramifications for it. But in an RPG, one little thing changes and it has just a massive domino effect on the entire rest of the route. I think it kind of just speaks to the passion of RPG speedrunners that they reroute these things so extensively. Like I remember when what what is like the most recent? I'm forgetting the name of the skip, but it's one of the ones that Claude put into the route relatively recently. It was like one of the big new changes, and it's like forced an entire extensive reroute of the game to save like, I don't know, 30 seconds or something. I might be misremembering some of the details, but I know that the game has seen like fairly extensive reroutes for fairly small increments of time. Yeah, the sewer star skip.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's a fairly new change.
I say fairly. It's I say fairly. It's been several years, but you know, like it's a hard game to crack.
Yeah, it really is. I actually don't remember a lot of the differences of that versus the main route, but if anyone's curious, they can go to smrpgspeedruns.com, and there's a Discord link there. If you join there, the Discord is broken up into categories. There's a category for SNES speedrunning, there's one for Switch speedrunning, and there's one for the randomizer. That's where Discord is like the home of all those things. Mm-hmm. In the SNES speedrunning section, there is a news channel, and currently the only post in there is about Claude's new route, because like we just broke up the news channel into categories like last week. So right now, SNES News, that has a link to Claude's new route, which you can compare against the route on the actual wiki itself, smrpgspeedruns.com, and you can kind of like pick out where the differences are, especially like in boss fights and things like that.
It's just interesting to me, like seeing the nature of these kinds of runs. Like one little thing changes, and then a whole host of new things have to change in order to make the route work. And you kind of really just see the passion of the community in that they will go through those lengths to make sure that everything thereafter works in a way that is like still saving time for the route. Like, it's just kind of one of the things that I've always enjoyed seeing with like RPG speedruns in general. Because it is a labor of love in a lot of cases. These are long games. The routes, like if one thing changes, it's like you have to reroute the entire game at times, or at least like a whole bunch of things thereafter. Because it's like you take one thing away, suddenly you're not good enough to deal with this other thing, or you're losing time later.
Yeah, it's true. I've built like spreadsheets for SMRPG that let you kind of track that. They're so complicated that they make my computer lag, but they work.
Doesn't surprise me.
I build these sheets that like tracks who has what equip on at what time, how much of each item you have in your inventory, how much inventory space you have, how much inventory space you have if you freebeat everything, how many coins you have, and then you can like input an interaction, and the interaction will like automatically calculate like what that does to your current game state. And it'll tell you like, oh, you don't have the coins to do that. Like, what are you trying to do? Or you can't put the safety ring on Peach and Gino at the same time. If you try to like change one little thing, it'll tell you every ramification that has down the line. And I used that when I was rewriting Low Level last year. Last year there was like, Low Level is amazing. And
I love Low Level. It's so silly.
So here's the story of how I ruined Bep's life. The Low Level was a category that he had tried before, but he didn't like really enjoy the experience of following the route because Low Level had not been audited as intensely as any percent had. So there were some times when like it would tell you to use an item that he didn't have, or other runners have like things where you just freebie everything and you don't know which ones you're supposed to keep and which ones you're not supposed to, because Low Level is a very inventory heavy category, and of course when you freebie 25% of your stuff, that has implications on your storage space. So there were like 3 different Low Level routes at the time, and I sought to pick out the best strategies from each one and make them all work together, because the big the big time sink in low level is the boss fights, because you have to do them over and over and over again until you get the lucky egg gamble and you get to get out with 0 EXP. So I picked out like what seemed like the fastest boss strats to me, and then I tried to reconcile how to get the equipment that each one needs to manipulate your speed, how to make sure you have enough bombs, where to get the coins to get those bombs, like from the Mulville swap shop, and I used that sheet for that. And eventually I ended up like writing a new low level route last year, where inside the route, every time it tells you to do a menu, it also has like a section off to the side that says, here's what your inventory should look like right now. If you have anything that is not in this list, you can safely sell it. So it takes all the thinking out of like having to manage your freebies. So Bep really liked that, and then he started running low level, and then he never stopped running low level. So
yeah,
he low level world record was untouched since 2015. I Ate Your Pie had it after he did like an amazing grind and got the best run ever on the old route in like 2015 with an 852. Under the new route, and with the tweaks that like Fralius and some others have made to it that include like more RNG manipulations, like the record right now is like 6.5 hours or something like that, which like was unheard of in like as recently as 2021. Like that was just unimaginable. And that's why I love building these sheets and things like that, because like you said, RPG speedruns have a thing where like any little ramification, any little thing you do has ramifications all down the board. And I had to know what those ramifications were if I tried to change what my party equipment makeup was in low level. And it turns out I changed one thing and my whole sheet goes red. It's like, oh no. Okay, well, I'm glad I built this thing, because RPG speedrunning do be like that, and we love low level.
I've heard low levels getting a huge change with the remake. That might be the most affected category, relatively speaking.
So I think that here's what I think is going to happen to low level. The definition of low level is just beat the game at the lowest level possible. I don't know if this is actually going to happen, but I would love it if it did. I think low level might be the category where you have to switch between normal and breezy to take advantage of what each difficulty mode offers, because you can change the difficulty mid-game. So in breezy mode, you get 20% more EXP for every battle, so that's an obvious no-no for the early game of low level. Before you even have access to the Lucky Jewel and the Lucky Hammer, you're going to need to play on normal mode. But because normal mode only allows you to carry up to 3 rock candies, and rock candy is like one of your primary damage sources in the late game, breezy mode lets you have up to 30. So if we want to actually beat the game, we might end up having to actually use breezy mode in order to be able to complete the game, because like it just might not be possible with our inventory limitations. But low level routers are a very like they're tenacious. Like they're gonna find a way. They're gonna find the best possible low level strategy. So we'll see what happens. But right now it's looking like, I don't know, man. I think we really need that inventory space. And if that's what makes it faster to beat the game, then that's what's faster to beat the game.
I would like to ask, Pidge, we've kind of touched on it there. Super Mario RPG obviously has a fantastic speedrunning community, but it does seem to me that it's like really, really quite long running. I remember seeing Romscout run Super Mario RPG Original Classic Games Done Quick in 2010. So how do you know how long the sort of game has been actively sort of speedrun?
Oh, I don't know like exactly when the first runs went up on SDA. I just know that like you said, Romscout ran it in like 2010, I think it was.
Yes, it was, yeah.
And then I think Cypher ran it at GDQ 2013, and Checkers ran it 2015. And all of this was before like Swap Glitch was found. So it's been going on like for at least a long time, because like Cypher's original grind before he ran it at GDQ was when he was trying to beat the Japanese record. Like he just sat down for a weekend and just grinded all weekend trying to beat the Japanese record. This was like in the early 2010s. So there was, and the record at the time was 255. So there was like already a lot of history there. So I don't really know like the origins before that, because I only got into speedrunning in like 2016, and this is just like what I know from other people who've been in the community for a long time. But that's like, it's been a thing for like since at least that long ago.
Yeah, I've noticed it's a fairly tight-knit bunch. Like, we had Millennium run the game at Limit Break 2023, and he'd been like a record contender for that game since like 2015 or something, if not sooner. So I definitely like, I see some of the names of people who still work on that. I've seen a lot of people who run the game like popping up in chat. Like Just Incredible has been in here as well. He's had, you know, a top time in that game for several years as well. So it's awesome to see, you know, people you like this game showing up, for the record.
It is a very, very it's got a lot of longevity, and it's amazing to see the dedication. And as you say, a lot of the players, including yourself, Pidge, and Justin, and others, have been running it for a very long time. So it's really, really good to see. I mean, I remember seeing I've seen it in person at 2019. I saw your run, most of the stuff. And
I saw that
me,
run too.
I know,
Yeah, you were hosted for it. He couched for my 2017 run too.
I loved it. It was very special. It was really, really good. And this is one of my favorite RPG speedruns. It absolutely is. And I watched them and knew more about the speedrun than I did actually about the game casually, because I never played it casually myself until the last year. I spent more time sort of watching the speedruns. But yeah, it's got a very, very strong community behind it. So,
yep.
Are we just ready to move on to some questions, Ghost, do you think?
I think so. We've been rambling for quite some time. I mean, we could talk about this game for a long time. I know Pidge would be more than content to have a at-length conversation here.
I mean, if anybody wants that, they can just go to my Twitter account.
Yeah,
it's just an extended conversation with myself about SMRPG. That's all my account is.
So we have gotten some questions here piling up on chat. First question by Puexel. That's nobody in particular, just the person who puts on the event. What do you think of the what are your thoughts on the remake's soundtrack, and any highs and any lows?
The remake soundtrack, in like to put it like the TLDR version, it's amazing. I have some thoughts about how it was done that I find kind of interesting. I think that the remake really emphasizes like the individual like listenability of each song as a standalone song, as opposed to the original game, where the original game, I feel like the soundtrack was more of a like cohesive piece of art. Like a lot of the soundtrack is so Yoko Shimomura has stated that like one of her main musical influences was that her dad had a lot of like records in his household of like Latin music. So you can see like a lot of that influence in SMRPG. Like there's like a lot of you hear like some salsa influence in some of the songs.
There's Latin rhythms all over.
Yeah.
I saw
just all
Music
over the
Theory did a
place.
video about the game talking about all those kinds of rhythms.
I actually haven't watched that, but like I was actually on a different stream where I was talking with two game composers. Like we went through every individual track in the game and discussed like what each one did, like from a music theory's perspective, and how it was like meaningful to what was happening in the game at that time, and how it like ties back with conventions from the pre-existing Mario games, which Shimomura was already a huge fan of. And something that like really glues the soundtrack together is that like most tunes like use a marimba in some capacity. Like the marimba is like the glue of the SMRPG soundtrack, and you can, if you like pay attention to it, you can like really notice it as you go from place to place. In the remake, I think that's less of a thing. I don't think that the remake really like incorporates that as much, but the remake has definitely like enhanced every individual song, like as like just something that you would listen to on its own because it's a good song. I love some of like the additional riffing from the instruments in some of the tunes that I in the remake that just kind of like enhance on the melody that I already know. And I think that like a lot of songs definitely got like an individual glow up, and it's really well done. I think that players will enjoy switching back and forth between the modern and the original soundtrack, because I don't think that one outshines the other. They accomplish different things, and they're both amazing.
Yeah, I love Shima Mura's music. Just so many of her soundtracks I think are great. I love her work on both Mario RPG and the Mario and Luigi series. I love, Live Alive, Radiant Historia, Xenoblade Chronicles. Just brilliant musician. I'm happy this, like, one of the things I saw when the remake, like in the week before the remake, was a ton of the like music YouTubers I follow all dropped like Mario RPG videos. So we got a question from Ghoul. This is going to be completely off topic here. Well, mostly off topic. When is the Jigglypuff sprite swap for Mallow in the randomizer?
Probably about half past never. Dealing with that game's graphics code is a nightmare.
Mm-hmm. We've got another one here. Magius asks, do you think the credits still being part of the run's timing will change? And do you think that should stay part of it?
Credits will not be part of the timing anymore. That's a holdover from JRTA timing in the early 2000s for SNES, and new game, new rules, we can do what we want. The final timing is going to be like last input.
I mean, to be fair, when a runner PB is in that game, they're probably going to have the credits on anyway. Because it's like, that's just kind of your like sit there and just kind of reflect on your run. But it's also a darn good credit sequence. That's like, it started really the tradition of just great Mario RPG like credit sequences. Like both, like all of the Paper Marios have a good one. Like Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga has like a fantastic credit sequence.
I always feel like when I run SMRPG in a marathon and I have to end at like Smithy KO, I always feel like a little bit robbed when I can't do the credits sequence, because they're just amazing. Like I can't get through the game's credits without crying. Like I'm just that much of an emotional baby. Like you can tell why I related a lot to Mallow growing up. For anyone who hasn't beaten the remake yet, the credit sequence is really, really special, and you're going to like it. And some of you will probably cry like I did.
Next. Oh, yep.
We got two Smash related questions. One, Gino for next Smash game. That's not really a question. I don't. We don't know the future of Smash, but fingers crossed. I think he finally got like a sticker or a trophy or something. Other question: who is your least favorite character in Smash 64 and why?
I do want to touch on Gino for Smash, because like, if that's asking me my opinion on Gino for Smash, I think the short answer is yes, because the community has worked so hard for it. My personal answer is no, because I said if Gino ever gets into Smash, then I have to go back to competitive Smash, and I don't want to go back to competitive Smash. if the Smash remix modders put him in that game, then 100% I'm going back to Smash 64. We're like, oh my god, I can't. I've been retired for 7 years. Don't make me pick it up again. I've done like some projects throughout the years that people have said like, oh, is this going to be how we're going to get Gino in Smash finally? Like, it's I love it. Super Mallow, the guy who originally started that campaign, is someone that like I talked to like personally, and he's really, really cool. And I can't imagine like what he must have felt like seeing the remake happen after all of the letters that he mailed to Nintendo in like the early 2000s.
I think he was the one who made that name rings a bell. I think he was the one who made that website that I mentioned with the petition earlier. Yeah,
that was probably him. I have him on Discord. Like he's great. Like he did like such amazing work for SMRPG, and he's someone that I really admire. As for the Smash 64 question, least favorite character, I don't think I really have one. Smash 64 is like, I think that there are two perfect games. One is SMRPG and the other is Smash 64. Sorry, that's like kind of a non-answer, but I don't know.
But Mizuki Bauer's asking, I don't know if you're willing to share this, I'm sure you are, how many consecutive super jumps have you gotten so far in the remake, I'm assuming, since you said the timing has changed?
Oh, it's changed because it's easier. It's still like capped at 100.
It's 100 easily then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. So I think that we're gonna get wrapping up here. Do you have any closing thoughts, either of you?
Speedrun SMRPG, the original game.
This is your moment for like shout outs and your sellout stuff.
I mean, I want to just shout out everybody that I've mentioned in the podcast, like all the people that make SMRPG speedrunning what it is, like all the people that hunt for strats and glitches and do all like the routing work. The SMRPG like speedrunning pastebin that Claude puts out every time there's a change like has a list of credits in it, and he's got my name in there even though I didn't contribute any strats. So shout outs to him. Shout outs to Justin, my good friend and world record holder, who was with me in the glitch exhibition last week because I've been very sick, and having him as a commentator like kind of saved my life there. I want to give a shout out to like everybody in the SMRPG speedrunning community, like whether you speedrun OG or remake alike. If you're like interested in picking up either game or like talking more in depth about like OG SMRPG randomizer, then I highly recommend you go to I will spell this out, smrpgspeedruns.com, which has like a link to the Discord and the IRC and anything that you need. If you want to learn how to speedrun the original game, you can just read that wiki and you'll get a sub 3. Yeah, that's I think that's about all I have right now. Like that's kind of like my parting message. Thank you very much for having me on this podcast today. So shout outs to Goal for reaching out to me, and shout outs to the two of you and our tech person for hanging out with me today.
Yeah. Well, shout outs to Ash and our tech person who does a great job making sure that we get these up and helps out big time with just all sorts of stuff with the event. You never forget to shout out the some of the behind the scenes people who make all this stuff happen. Yep. It's been a pleasure having you.
Yeah, carry on, Pitch.
Go ahead.
I just saw a question in the chat. Where can we find you? So my name on screen, Pidge01. I use that name on like every single platform that exists. Twitter, YouTube. YouTube is just like Pidge0 and then the number 1. Like Twitch, Blue Sky, Threads, Reddit, GameFAQs. Like anywhere you want to find me, I have that name.
GameFAQs. I have so much nostalgia for GameFAQs forums discussions of Mario RPGs.
Well, we'd just like to thank you again, then, the Pitch. Thank you so much, and thank everybody for watching. We hope you've enjoyed our little podcast series here. It was an absolute honor and a privilege to spend some time chatting to Pitch about Super Mario RPG. And thank you again, Ghost, for having me along. It's appreciated. And look forward to. We will be back. I think we're back in a couple of weeks. Ghost, is that correct?
That's the plan. Yes.
We've got something coming up, so keep tuned.
Google's got something cooking.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all for watching. Thank y'all on YouTube who got to this far in the video. We really appreciate y'all. Check us out. We're hoping to put out more stuff like this as we continue going on to the rest of the year. We got some fun little videos for you.